Excuse me. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Home Inspection Matters. I'm Jan Lucas, and this is Brian Long. I've got a case of the coffees today. Brian and I have been kicking around a couple things to talk about this week. We're going to talk about how the whole process starts. Contacting your inspector, talk about, wrapping up the inspections, things like that. Anything we can do to kind of answer the questions on the ins and outs. So, last week, Brian and I talked about, setting up the schedules and stuff like that, and how we do the scheduling and the necessary information needed for the scheduling. So, Brian, why don't we roll through with how you go about your scheduling? I can kind of chime in on some of mine too.
Sure, absolutely. Well, two things that's kind of funny. First, I love that you opened with a cough because I did get a feedback from a client was like, "You guys should mute if you're coughing or drinking." I'm like, I don't know. We'll try to do that, but frankly, we're doing this at the end of a busy day. Sometimes we're going to cough on it. So great introduction. I'm happy with that. But I launched using Spectora for my scheduler, which is our software, and there was some things lacking with my initial program to capture clients' information. And what that was causing was a little bit more back end work for me and for my client. I'm repeatedly asking information not repeatedly, I'm asking different questions that I couldn't capture initially using Calendly. And I had looked at Next Inspect that Yonn uses, and it's a really robust system, but I need something that was kind of a happy medium. And lo and behold, in the back end of the software, the Spectora calendar was actually perfect for me. So the integration now takes you right from you got to put the work in, you got to put your name, you got to put your address in, but then it's set up a lot of the questions I needed to know ahead of time, and it's starting the report. So, what is your foundation type? Things like distances and stuff, where in Jan's case, it's a little bit more critical than what it is for me. My average inspection is very close to home. I'm in a dense city environment, so my inspections today were all less than 8 miles from my home. So
That
that's
must be nice.
uh, it is it is very nice. So I mean, I'm lucky a lot of times if it goes well, I'm actually able to do errands in between inspections. They're so close at times. Now it's not always that way. I was an hour away in Middletown this week, and I still travel a distance. But if I'm looking at the average inspection for me, so once you put that in, a lot of things like square footage, it's captured off of using Zillow or whatever the sources are available online for Spectora to capture. And then once you put in all the information, it comes for me to review. Once I review it, you get your written agreement with all the services, and you can put notes and questions in there. So it's great. I'm seeing clients are I'm going to send you the disclosures. So I had asked for disclosures in a phone conversation. Or like disclosures will be sent in email. Another person said, "Hey, you need to send a certificate of insurance to the builder. I've got a new build coming up. In 2 weeks, it's going to be ready for a builder I haven't worked with. So I've got to send them my proof of insurance." And they're putting those notes right into the questionnaire for me. So it's made it easy. And the funny thing is I asked you last week on how many agents do you have put in inspections? You're like, oh, about 50% or so. There's a lot more than what it was for me. I had never had it. Well, with the new build, the agent was scheduling it, including the client in. So I'm dealing directly with it. And the agent loved the new format. So, for them, it took out a lot of the guesswork to get the information into the system for me. So week one, pretty happy with how it's working. Had a small problem with my calendar syncing to it, and I double booked a few things, but luckily everything worked out. So
Yeah, you were showing me the Spector calendar before we came on, and it has evolved quite a bit. There's still a few things, I guess. I'm an old dog. I'm kind of hard to teach new tricks to, but there's things about. I love Spectora. I use it as my inspection software. But there are some aspects of what I use that I like,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense that people can view my calendar, my upcoming calendar, everything moving forward on that. But once it's blocked and locked out, they can see my month-long calendar and they can see what days I have available. Um, what you were showing me is kind of like that month calendar isn't really available right there, but there's benefits to both. The big thing is getting the information into the system. Um,
Yeah, the one thing that I see the problem with, and this happened on another app recently, is that with it being the end of the month, you're seeing like the week behind it. It would be great if it would see more time ahead. So you have to click
yeah,
over to see the next month. So
yeah.
it's not in. I would say it's not intuitive to what you're used to seeing. You have to actually look at
It's evolved, and it's probably going
it.
to evolve even more. And once it evolves even more, I'm most probably going to jump on it,
Yeah,
because it's included with the Spectora membership that we both have.
yeah,
And myself, it costs me per inspection that's booked through it, which is
yeah.
fine.
It's cost of doing
Um,
business.
yeah, I mean, originally I was supposed to get, I think it was like 3 years free because I mentioned them a couple times on Facebook, and that went away really quick.
Yeah,
But it's the whole booking aspect of it, when it comes down to it, is important. It gives you the information you need. It lets the client know that you've recognized it, and
hmm,
once you send that confirmation out of it, the inspection's booked, it's solid, it's taken care of. And the nice thing is it's not guesswork. I have a lot of my real estate agents that'll use it. I have one company in particular, that uses it very much so, and they're probably my top realty group here, which is the Tim Pierce Group in Bluffton.
hmm.
Absolutely amazing group, great team, great management, great closing coordinator, and they uh, their closing coordinator lives by my calendar. She loves it. she
Hmm.
she she also knows that because I'm a how do I put it, worst case scenario type of person, I actually will block a couple spots for emergency inspections.
Oh yeah.
I had one come in from that group today, and she said to me that, I see your calendar's completely booked. Do you have anything open that I don't know about? And
Hmm.
I was like, when do you need it? So, when's your due diligence up? How often, how big is it? And I was able to squeeze her in at the end of the week, because I like to have that ability for those loyal realty people to know that in a case of emergency, I have something that I can probably fill in for them.
And it's not even the inspection. Life happens. Things happen with the inspections. Reports take longer. You've got to be available to have some flexibility. And I had a really good friend who is inspecting with me on that this week. Who I'm usually doing commercial stuff for him,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, "Can you push it to 3 on Friday?" And it's like, man, by Friday, I've used up all my flexibility. Like
Yep.
I can't, and so it sucks saying no. It's able to work with them, but it's a first time home buyer, and I really would love to have moved it, but I give myself a little two schedule thing, so I'll get the call over the weekend. What's your Monday like? Because I think we're going to have to give a short window on the inspection.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, Monday's an office day, but I still, I end up
Yeah.
inspecting.
I typically, my, what I call my hidden inspection times, are typically towards the end of the week, because people in Georgia, they have 5 days due diligence,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. And in South Carolina, it can be as much as 2 weeks.
Really?
Yes. So, sorry, I got a case of the throat itchies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so typically what I do is, like, my Thursdays and Fridays, I tend to leave an inspection open each day. Not all the time. Please don't take advantage of it, people. This is just literally an
General, yeah.
informative thing. I tend to do that just so that if something comes up, hey, we went under contract. And down here, we get a lot of vacation rental turnovers Fridays and Saturdays. our turnover days. So, sometimes we have to squeeze them in short notice also. Um, so when people are scheduling online, what type of questions are you trying to capture from them that Spectora or my system? My system doesn't capture square footage, age of the house, type of foundation. And I tell people all the time, I was like, what you're getting there is a pretty hard price. And if the information is correct, if the information is not correct, expect an adjustment on price.
Right.
But what are you expecting people to give you or provide you when you're when they're booking? Like, obviously they can put the address in, but there's other things that they're going to probably need.
Sure. So the address is the first key part, and luckily, if it's in the system, if it's in whatever sources that Spector is using, whether it's Zillow or MLS or how they're getting it, the foundation. I have one question on there: is there a crawl space? So I do charge a little bit more for a crawl space. Um, the distance is captured in there based off the address, so it's not a question, but they do factor in the mileage. So for me, I start at 30 miles. I have an increase in cost for there, and it's nominal. To be transparent, it's $25. But that's if it's 30 miles, it's adding an hour to my day. So really doesn't put a big burden on the client, but it also takes a little burden off myself. It's fair to everyone. Other than that, there's different um, scenarios as far as age of home. I'm still not doing anything on. I think I'm probably making a mistake there, just because I live in such a historic district that they are taking longer as I'm doing more new builds. So probably what I'll end up doing when price changes happen or increases happen annually is that um, newer homes won't get as big of an increase as what the older homes do. So I'm still, in a historic district. I don't do age. Guys that vary with a lot of new construction, I think they have a bit higher for older homes because they take a lot longer time. I mean, I
Oh,
was
yeah.
a smaller home today. I was a solid 4 hours in the home with the sewer scope. And it wasn't that big of a home, but there is just a lot of things you're reviewing, especially with a termite inspection too, where we found some past termite issues. Um, the next part is we're going to be looking at the ancillary services, so you can choose them. And if it's an older home and I see that you don't choose something, you might hear from me saying, "Hey, is there something in the disclosures that they talk about this, or should we talk about why you should do a sewer scope in a home over 50 years old?" So there's some confirmation from there. So basically, it's square footage, distance, and then I am missing out like how many bathrooms there are. I mean, it's lovely when you show up to a home and there's 5 bathrooms. You're like, oh, there's five, and of course, this bathroom has 3 sinks into it because you need the toilet sink, you need a double sink, the tub and the bathtub. They exist, and you're like, that's a lot of faucets that you're testing.
Well, just wait until when you come down for a visit and I take you to one of these houses that has 2 kitchens,
Yeah,
a in-law suite above the garage, and an outdoor kitchen.
yeah. I got hit with an in-law suite above a garage, and it was so funny. I was meeting a very good friend of mine, and I was like, "Oh, I'm doing a great house in Over the Rhine." And then he's like, "What's the address?" And I told him, and he's like, "Oh, wow, it has 2 kitchens." I'm like, "What?" I totally had missed it, but you know, I didn't. It didn't matter to me. I was like, "It is what it is" at that point. So
I had a beautiful house on Hilton Head that had 2 kitchens, an in-law suite, and an outdoor kitchen, but also on top of that had 3 bar sinks and a movie theater with a full bar.
but yeah, so mostly it's that you got to kind of know what you want in the inspection. If you know about the ancillary services, that I hope from anybody who new buyers are listening to this, they hear like some importance about ancillary services, or at least do their homework of what am I doing to buy the home, what's in the SOP for the home inspection, as we talked about before, and what do I want to know about my home to go forward. And happy to coach with that. But the basic part is what I like about Spectora is it's capturing a lot about the home just for the foundation. If there's a finished basement, I don't have an extra charge for that. Do you charge more for finished basements or?
We don't have basements. We're too close to the
Okay.
water table.
Yeah. Sorry.
I
Yeah. I hear that from
wish we
other
did.
formats. Yeah. Yeah. It would make inspecting stuff in the crawl space. You would have less crawl spaces at that point. So.
Exactly. I mean, there are those half type of basements where 4 feet of it's like subterranean and the others above it. But no, not really. Kind of like the Sherwood Forest homes in the Cincinnati area.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of what I'm really looking for, and that's what I like. That if your software and calendar is pulling the information about the home right up front, I still get to review it prior to booking that inspection. But the feedback from the agents this week for the new software was it was seamless. The notes and the communication to me, and I'm not going through two services. You mentioned Spectora has grown, or how you use Next Inspect and Spectora. I know guys that are still using ISN and Spectora.
Yep.
You're almost paying for two different service companies, where I know with the Next Inspect, at least the cost per inspection isn't high compared to, you're not having to raise your rates to cover that cost. It's a
No, I
nominal,
mean,
nominal expense to your margins.
as a multi-inspector company, I mean, Next Inspect isn't cheap, but it's not expensive.
Right.
And I've looked at the other softwares out there, and they serve a purpose. They really do. I mean, you've got Tap Inspect out there, you got Horizon Inspection Service, or Horizon software out there. Have all these other services out there, which are great. Each inspector is going to have to find something that fits them.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I look at with Spectora is the fact that it's ever evolving.
Yeah.
It hasn't stayed stagnant. It's continued to evolve. I remember when I started, I was, I think, one of two people in the local area that actually used Spectora,
Mm-hmm.
or not many. Um, and you know, now I think it's pretty much everywhere down here. My largest competition, which is a great guy, he has a great business, does great service down here, uses Horizon inspection software, and that works for him. His template is ever growing. He does a great job. His inspection software is, he said his software is a living being, and I agree with that. I'm adding things to it on a daily basis. I'm taking things out. I'm rewording things. So is he. But I do think the direction that Spector is going is the right direction. I like the fact that the digital reports, I think those are extremely helpful. Now, not everybody uses them. We have a large retirement community moving down here that isn't necessarily what I would call computer savvy.
Yeah.
Um, and they do like the digital reports, and some of the realtors like the digital reports.
Yeah.
But I find that the closing coordinators and the people in the back office at the realty companies enjoy it because of the ability to manipulate the repair request addendum. They can build their own repair request in there, put their own notes in there, and attach it to their software. They can export it as in PDF.
Mm-hmm.
They can save it to the client's files. It's very easy to send it off to the seller's agents with a description of what was seen in the inspection report, with a request of either credit or repair, or credit, either give me a credit or give me a repair.
Yeah.
And I think that's helpful too. You and I were talking about talking to realtors about, instead of sending the whole report or instead of sending the whole summary, working and being an educator also with the software, so that that person that's doing the repair request can just send out the summary of the items they want to have repaired instead of sending out the whole summary.
Yeah. Then that's critical, and I want to put just a small pin in that for a second. I want the audience to understand as we talk about using the software that the comments in the report and the writing style is unique to the inspector.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the tool that we're using. So Yonn's inspection report, I've seen it. He shared a template with me, and I pirated a percentage of it off. That it actually came up on Facebook with the snake. I was like,
Snakes.
I have a snake in attic comment. I haven't found one yet, and everybody's like, "Oh, you're finding one now," and I was like, "No, I think if I take it out, I'll find one, but I'm leaving it in there."
4 copperheads, 1 rattler in 12 months.
Yeah. So what I've done, what it was helpful is when Jan shared that to me, there was a bit of a process in what he was doing, plus what I was doing, plus what Internachi did, the education, and it's like you take all that and you write your own report. um, you know, copying somebody's template. If you go to another inspector that uses Spectora, you're not getting Jan's report. You're not getting my report. You're getting whatever that inspector's created. So I just wanted to make that known that the software isn't creating the language or the deficiencies
No,
of the process that we're using.
no. One of the things that you do when you set up this business, and again, this goes back to touching on some of the stuff we talked about last week about new inspectors coming into the business. Um, there's a lot of preparation, for the audience to understand. Becoming an inspector, there's a lot of preparation, the education, all that, but also the building of your inspection report itself, what you as the inspector want to have in there, and evolving from there. I think one of the things that I try to welcome with my employees and myself is to realize we're greater as a team than we are as a group of individuals. And what I mean by that is I will ask my business partner and I'll ask any of my inspectors, like, if you have something that you think needs to be in the defects, if you have a process that's going to be a little bit more efficient, if you have any suggestions to make this more user friendly for the final end user being the client, um, to give me those suggestions. And, last week, my business partner and I had talked about a couple of things to streamline the system for ourselves to kind of save some time, still deliver a quality report, but at the same time, execute at a high level, but be more efficient. He gave me some suggestions. He was off on Friday. I took those suggestions and I had 3 inspections last Friday, and I executed the suggestions last Friday because, first and foremost, everything falls on my shoulders. And I wanted to make sure that I agreed with him. I was like, those sound good. I'll give them a try and see what I think. He came in yesterday and I said, everything you suggested, I completely agree with you. I think it's a good idea. And we move forward. But realize that the inspection process for Brian and myself will have similarities, but will also be very different in the language, the order of how we do our inspections, the defects verbiage, the way we word things. You're going to see a lot of things in inspection reports, that, how can I put it? The verbiage is very stock standard. Correction and further evaluation is recommended. Evaluation by a qualified or licensed professional. The recommendations, qualified plumber, licensed plumber, whatever you want to put in there, those are pretty much stock standard. But how we put the verbiage together is what's important.
Mm-hmm.
I tell everybody it's very important to read your inspection report, not only the summary, but the whole report. A lot of people will just read the summary and they don't realize in the report, what doesn't come up in the summary is the limitations. The summary is just going to show you the defects. It's actually not going to show you the home. Our inspection reports are very heavily pictorial and editorial. I like, especially in construction, I like to give people an education. One of the things that Grant had suggested to kind of make our process a little bit more efficient was some picture reductions, which I have totally taken them up on. And they did streamline the process and shave down about 45 minutes off of our inspection process. But, I can't implore people enough that if you just read the summary, or if somebody hands you a summary and that's all you pay attention to, you're not doing yourself justice. You just paid for 6 pages of information that is completely just a small, minute, myopic view of what your home is, especially in new construction. I tell everybody, you get your inspection report to look at serial numbers, ages and dates, HVAC systems. People don't realize this. You move into a house, you have a year to register your HVAC system. If you register it, typically the HVAC producer will give you 5 years of parts. No labor, but parts. Same thing with Renai on-demand hot water heaters. Or my bad, water heaters, not hot water heaters. Water heaters, because the water doesn't come in hot. Um, it gives you an extended warranty on the parts. So when Brian talks about the verbiage and how the reports are laid out, my process from beginning to end could be completely different process from beginning to end. How I call out a TPR, or a temperature pressure relief valve, not functioning properly, could be completely different than Brian's. I actually have a list of defects in my TPR defects of what are the possible things that are wrong with a TPR. I go into my defect, I highlight it, I bold it, I underline it, so that when they read through it, they know which one of those it is.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think it would behoove me or anybody to have TPR does not drain, TPR defies law of gravity and flows uphill. I have it in there like TPR should follow gravity, TPR should have an air gap, TPR shouldn't have T fittings, and that's all listed in my list in that one defect, and I highlight it, bold it, and underline it. And in there it says defect will be highlighted, bolded, and underlined in this defect.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's how those and how it looks in the report. How you're searching for those defects is different to each individual inspector. What in the field when I'm looking at something that's wrong, how I think about calling it up so I can get it into the report, um, is how I word mine. So there's a word pattern so I can find my inspection defects based on what I had already previously written, and then it's customized to the exact scenario that I'm finding that day. But it's meant to help streamline the process. And you know the summary, I actually had a summary get shared this past week, and um, I got an email and they're like, hey, we got your inspection report and we have a few questions for you, and it wasn't my client. And
Mm-hmm. That's what I was
unfortunately,
alluding to earlier.
yeah, unfortunately I couldn't talk about it. Well, not unfortunately, I can't talk about that because the inspection agreement you signed with your inspection is between me and you. You have to tell me that you want your agent to be listed on there. Your spouse or whoever you want added to it, you can do that at the beginning. But the inspection report is the property of the client, and the client does have the ability to share it if they want. They should let the inspector know if they're doing that. An example, I did a new construction build that for their final inspection, and it was shared to the builders, and they emailed the copy of the inspection report with me included on there that they're sharing it with the builders. I'm in the loop of it. Finding out the inspection report is just with a third party person that I have no idea who they are. And my hope was that they understood my statement was, unfortunately, I can't talk to you about the report. It is the property of my client, and you're only looking at a summary. So you really should have a home inspection. And I pulled the language from my inspection agreement, and it's the same thing verbatim. It really says you should have a full inspection, seek a full inspection to get it done, because the summary is only listing um, things that were found wrong on that day at the inspection. Now, are the things still wrong? Is there things still factual? Yes.
Have they
Right.
been repaired? Have they been repaired correctly? Were there
Correctly.
any limitations?
Yeah, it was over 2 weeks old, and there was stuff that went through, and the deal had obviously fell through, which was why it was being shared. Is that somebody got the full inspection? Not like you said, you can share just a material defect that you want done, but it doesn't always happen that way. The summary is a very easy thing to share versus going through the request to repair quote builder. Um, and I did have a conversation with the agent because um, it can't be shared. It's not the best thing in the world to do. It's not legal to share an agreement that is or an inspection report that is not yours to a client that's purchasing it. Is it a mistake? Yes, and I don't feel it was done maliciously. It was done to um, sell the home, but unfortunately, I don't know how that person felt me telling them I can't talk to you about it. So
It's a hard It's a hard conversation to have, Brian. I mean,
yeah,
you know, I don't have a problem having those conversations.
me neither. Yeah,
I've got some pretty thick skin, and I've told people, I'm like, I have no idea where you got that report, but I don't have you listed anywhere in my system as a client. Especially and I'll be like, what's the address? And I'll be like, if you need an inspection, let me know, but I am not at liberty to discuss anything in this report. Well, can't you just? No, I can't.
right.
That's It's hard to say, but at the same time, you and I talked about it. What does it mean for us? It means, number one, if they take that report and they use it to buy the house, and then they move in and they find something else wrong with the house, well, the client's going to be like, well, you didn't find this report. And that's when we look at it and say, we didn't inspect it for you. We
Yeah,
don't know what condition the house was in.
yeah,
We inspected for somebody else 2, 3, 4 weeks ago.
right. Yeah, you don't. It's also the fact that how is it fair to our client? How do you charge the person that you're talking to about limited items across the board?
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, if I'm taking away my time to talk to that person, I'm not giving it to my clients in the field because I'm very much into I have I have a total of 8 appointments that I'm available for a week. And in those appointments, I give 120% to my clients that I'm
Mm-hmm.
working for. I can't take somebody that where my client paid good money and give them information for free. It's not fair to the person that I did the work for. Um, and really, I have no liability in it. The liability goes to the agent sharing the report, um, that they shouldn't have done that. So
Well, again, it's not trying to slag on an agent or anything like that, but it just
right.
comes down to the whole thing of like, we've put a lot of work. We put a lot of work in our industry, and you know, a full report and a summary are two different things. If the selling agent only got the summary, but the homeowner has the full report and the summary, that homeowner could have pulled out of that inspection report for something that wasn't even in that summary.
Hmm.
They could have been like, we've had a better look at the guts of this house, the inner workings of this house. It's not for us.
Hmm.
And it can be in combination of what's on that summary and what's in the rest of the report.
Yep.
Um, the big thing that I always think about is, in the best way I can describe this, and this will make sense to you, is when you get a Carfax report. If a dealership handed you a Carfax report and it has today's date on it, it's right. If somebody's selling you another car and hands you a Carfax report from when he bought it, are you going to pay for another Carfax report? Are you going to pay for more investigation on it? Absolutely, you are. Are you going to take his word that, like, hey, I've had this service, here's all my receipts? Nowadays, people use those types of reports when they're buying automobiles, all that stuff,
Hmm.
it, and they pay for it every time, because that's the most current information. And I think a lot of clients lose track of the fact that, okay, you had the home inspection. These clients had a home inspection. They pulled out. Well, now the seller had these 4 items repaired. Well, you and I both know handymen, well, at least handymen in South Carolina don't have to have a license.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they can come in, do paint, drywall, stuff like that. And I know handymen down here that do electrical and plumbing and absolutely have no rhyme or reason. And in the state that I live in, those handymen shouldn't be doing that work, because I've gone into many of the work that's been done afterwards. And I said, you just wasted all your money, and re-inspected the house for the client that was buying the house, and said, this isn't fixed right. This isn't fixed right. This isn't fixed right. And then the seller has to go back in and fix it again. And now the client's having to go back, have to pay me to come back again for another reinspection fee.
Right.
Just because you're handed a summary does not mean that that's just the defects that are there at the time. And it does it again, it does a disservice to us in our profession. It's it's not right. I mean, if the homeowner decides to share the report, I completely get it. That's their choice. Or if the person who's buying the home decides to share it,
Yeah.
that's totally their choice. I can't do anything about it. But the person that's getting that report needs to realize that report has no we have no responsibility to them on that inspection report.
Right.
Zero.
Zero. And if it would, the the part two is, there's always it's rare to do it, but if there's been an inspection and you want to have the complete reinspection, have us inspect it for a pre-listing inspection,
Mm-hmm.
so that there can be the accountability for what was in the inspection for before the pre-listing. That way, it's the property of the sellers of the home
Mm-hmm.
that actions are going through. If there's points of negotiation based on what's in there, they can. If that buyer still does another inspection against it, then there's a conversation to be had of both parties to figure out how it's resolved. So at that point, there's there's a benefit to listing and selling a home that has a pre-inspection to it. Submitting a partial summary doesn't help the process. It only confuses it, because there's if there's questions to the buyer off of a summary, then there's probably a lot more questions.
Mm-hmm.
Example, where's the water shut off? What's the water pressure in the house? What is the um, what is the age of the furnace? So if the furnace isn't quite to end of service life, but it's on the cusp, it might not be an end of service life quote of age in the summary, but it's going to kind of tell you with the chart in on my report. It's going to be like, oh, well, it's 9 to 11 years old. It could be on right at the cusp of being at the, oh, it's going to be out of service at 14 to 15 years old.
Yeah, I do mine beyond average life expectancy defect at
Mm-hmm.
15 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people ask you, like, when they call and discuss with me the inspection report, it's one of those things like, what do you think about the house? And I was like, listen, let's go through the report. Let's talk about it. And honestly, a lot of people, I'm not sure how many of your clients actually call you and have conversations about it or discuss the report with you. It's very small for me.
Very small.
Um, but they'll call me and I'll be like, listen, the house is 18 years old. It's the original HVAC. It's the original water heater. They both function properly. There's nothing wrong with the way they're functioning. But be aware, they're 18 years old. They're beyond the average life expectancy. And they're like, what does that mean for me? That means that if you're buying this house, you need to include in your budget, most probably in the next 3 to 5 years, that those are two items you're most probably going to have to replace. But here's the problem. If the house is 12, 13, 14 years old and all they have is a summary, they don't have the defect in there. And I list it as a defect when it's beyond average life expectancy. They don't have that defect in there. So they're buying blind. They don't have age and dates on all this. They can't make a fully educated decision on all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I had, today that question of, you know, you have the conversation with your client on site too of, okay, so now I've told you everything negative about the home that we could find today.
Mm-hmm.
You've had every corner we went around, Brian's going, this is a problem, this is whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels a bit overwhelming. I tell people, go home when you get your report. It's going to be 24 hours later. Pause and digest what you have in the report and think about your priorities again of how you want to care for this home.
Yep.
So you're going to have things that you want to do to your home. My
Hmm.
example today, flooring was one of the things they wanted to do. Well, we found some areas in the subfloor that there was some termite damage, and I'm like, well, when you're doing your flooring, you should address this.
Hmm.
Having that conversation, it comes out as the termite, defect, but um, it really, they've got the education now that, oh, when a repair person comes in to do the exhaustive evaluation of the thing that needs to be corrected and repaired, it's going to exceed what was discovered in the home inspection report. Now, luckily in this case, we found that there was some subfloor damage. It was visible in the basement. But when your contractors come in and you tear into stuff, that's going to come up with more stuff. So they're going
Hmm.
to know now their flooring cost is going to be higher. They also are going to look at the door that needed to be replaced. They're going to look at the deck that's aging. They're going to look at a 2005 system. They're going to have that full coaching process as we walk through the inspection to say, okay, well, I have my wants. The home is in good condition. It's a good home. It's everything we want in a home. There's not a material defect that we would not buy the home. Okay. Um, but how we go about our plan going forward, we're going to have to think about a little bit. And between closing date and when you take ownership, they said, hey, do you think we should prioritize this round way? I'm like, live in the home, paint the walls you want to paint, do the things to, add your flair, move in, live in it.
Make the house your home.
Yeah, live in it and figure out the gremlins that you can't see today and plan for that maintenance. Vet your contractors, get 3 bids, get find out who you're going to get. Maybe a lot of times get 3 different opinions on how to correct it, and it might not even be what I suggested. Which method of that correction do you feel best going forward? And if you're having a problem with that and you feel comfortable calling me, call me. I'm there for you. I'm still your advocate
Yep.
to help you move forward. And
I have I have people all the time ask me, how would you repair this? And I said, the way I'd repair it and the way you repair it are going to be two different ways. And everybody asked me why. And I was like, I believe if I have to do something, I'm going to do it 1,000% right and probably 10 times more than what it needs to be done. And some people they don't want to do that. Like, I've got a leak, or I want to replace the countertop in my bathroom, or I want to I've got cracked tile in my shower. I was like, great, why don't you just redo your whole bathroom? Perfect
of course,
opportunity.
perfect opportunity. Yeah, and then you get the price of what it is for your shower, and you're like, well, hold on, the shower's 20,000.
I still would pull the pin. I did it. It's the whole thing. But I mean, you get the questions all the time, like, what is this going to take? How much is it going to cost? It goes back to the thing. Also, I tell clients all the time, like, I'm a home inspector. I'm not a remodeler. I'm not a builder. Um, do I know how to do all this stuff? Absolutely. When I do it for my own home, do I look at the price tag? Not really. And it's not because I'm like rich or anything, because I'm not. I make a very modest living. But I believe if I'm going to fix something or address something, I'm going to do it to last a lifetime. Some people, that's not in their budget. They're going to be like, I've got 3 broken tiles in my shower. I'm just going to replace that wall's tile. Well, I'm like, I got 3 broken tiles in my bathroom. I'm going to rip all that tile off, I'll rip all the wall covering off, replace all the wall covering, replace all the exterior insulation. I'm going to redo the shower floor. Then I'm going to retile the shower, because to me, that's the right way to do it. That's not everybody's right way to do it. They're going to hire a handyman. He's going to go, oh, I can knock these 3 out, get a color match tile for it. You're set.
Yeah. Yep.
Different strokes for different folks.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And
So
that's,
go ahead.
well, I was just, it's, that's the hard part, to, especially today with the new home buyer, not to keep using them for an example, is I told them, I don't know your ability to make the repairs and the stuff you want to do yourself. I think it's great to be excited about tackling home maintenance and I get excited for people doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what they have now is a professional look at what the inside of the home is,
Mm-hmm.
top to bottom. And then they can make that decision themselves. I mean, obviously they can Google and they can hire different vendors, and there's going to be stuff that they want to take on. And there was stuff that they didn't see. There's broken springs on garage doors. Nobody notices those. But we do.
Yeah.
you know um, so there's some things that you, that they will have to figure out for themselves, but they have the information to do that, which is the biggest point of having that full inspection.
So when you're doing this, when you're talking to your clients, you and I have talked about this. You talk about doing a checklist for the buyers on questions to be prepared to ask for.
When I know what you're referring to. It was just on the thought of, if you're walking a home and you're looking at it, and what are the things that you should look at potentially that you can tell the inspector as you're going to schedule the report. So I think the first thing is that, what is the foundation? Is it a basement, crawl space? Is it a finished basement? Those are kind of the first questions, starting from the ground up. Do you have different rates for detached garages versus attached?
Detached structure.
Detached structure.
Because most of the garages that are detached down here are in-law suites or frogs.
Okay. Remind me what frogs are. I know what it is, and I can't.
Family room above garage.
Yeah. Yep. So, is there oftentimes still a garage to the home and then a separate garage as a detached structure, or is it?
So, there are times where it's attached to the home, but they won't have frogs above them. A lot of the times when you find frogs above them, it'll be a garage with like a covered walkway from the garage to the house.
Mm-hmm.
Those types of things.
Okay. Yeah, I've just getting, not to get sidetracked. Just I've heard inspectors having additional charges because you're looking at the wall coverings, the roof, and
It's
everything.
an extra $150.
Extra $150.
And the reason why, it's not included in the taxable square footage of living space. So when you price out the inspection, let's say it's a 2,500 square foot house, the only thing that's being added, the only thing that's counted in that square footage of the house is a living space. And a lot of times when you're having to do those detached garages, it's additional living space. And a lot of times those detached garages are finished.
Yeah.
So you're looking at a sub panel, you're looking at an exterior, you're looking at possible frog above it, maybe a bathroom upstairs. So those detached structures do cost $150 because, again, it's more work.
Yeah. Yep.
I thought when you were talking about checklists, I meant checklists that buyers should have for the home inspector. Like I tell all my clients, there's no such thing as a silly question except for the one you don't ask.
Absolutely.
I tell them all, if we're going to talk or when we're going to talk, have a list of questions. Ask me about the house. Don't ask me about every room. Don't ask me about the important items. Your hot button items is what I call them.
Okay.
My hot button items are any issues with the plumbing, any issues with the HVAC, any issues with the roof, any issues with electrical, drywall, paint, stuff like that. I can totally cover all that stuff.
Right.
I'm not an electrician. I'm not a plumber. I'm not a roofer, and I am not an HVAC tech.
Right. Right.
I think people lose track or focus on the fact that a home is going to have defects.
Mm-hmm.
New construction is not perfect. Resales are not perfect. And when you're buying a house, you've got to realize that like somebody's hung pictures on the wall. 10 years ago, little Johnny left a skateboard in the hallway, and yes, there's a drywall mark there from where he put his shoulder through the wall. There's going to be those little defects.
Yeah.
And people need to wrap their arms around it, and that shouldn't kill a deal. But HVAC doesn't operate, doesn't have a good delta T. Water heater is set to 150, but the water's coming out at 105. Roof is delaminating. It's had 4 patches on it. Those are all things that home buyers, I think, should write a list, when they're asking their home inspector. going through the report, and also ask, after they go through the report, write a list of questions about what's in that report.
Right. Right. Yeah, because those are the key things, like the um, older homes. A lot of times you're seeing they're grounded to the plumbing, but there's not an exterior ground. So what does that mean to the home buyer? That's a big question to figure out, and I'm going to defer the electrician to how to correct it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm going to say you're going to want to get a grounding rod, and it's not the utility company putting it in because it's past the service.
Nope.
I'm going to say that you can talk to electricians about replacing outlets that have GFCIs for the two wired outlets that will help give you better protection. That would be better than having to rewire the house. But as you make improvements to the home and you live in your home, because you're going to have to do that. It's one of the joys of being a homeowner is making
Yep.
it yours, making a house a home. Those are going to add to the cost you have to think about.
Yep.
And it's staying in a home 5 to 7 years. You're going to come across that, and you're going to spend money on the things that aren't pretty in home.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I live in a 7-year-old home, and I'm adding things to it constantly to make a house a home.
Yeah.
You were talking about grounding rods. I think back to one of the most common defects I see down here is gas lines not bonded to the house.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people all the time, you got to have bonding to gas.
Yeah.
But
But not until when? Was it late? It was after 2000, right? When I came into.
mm-hmm,
Yeah.
yep. But I still see houses that are 2003, 2004, 2005 down here that it's not on it.
So the little coil line around the exterior meter, usually green or whatever color
Yep.
wrapped around it. Somebody told me the other day, well, that's the bonding, right?
No, that's how they find the gas line.
They find the gas line now that they can trace it.
I actually had my trainee today, and he goes, "Well, isn't that bonding?" And I go, "No, no, no.
Yeah.
They have a machine that hooks up that sends a low voltage current, and they can find the gas
Yeah.
line, how it
Trace it that
runs."
way. Yeah. I was like, good
Um,
attempt. At least they identified there was something that wasn't part of the gas line there. So
oh, absolutely. I mean, it's it goes back to the whole thing. Construction has changed,
yeah.
vastly different. I had two ends of the spectrum today. I had a new construction final. Actually, I had three ends of the spectrum. New construction final. I had a 1950s home with a crawl space, and I had a new construction pre-drought. New construction final, in and out in 2 hours. 1,100 square foot, 1950s home, all of 3.5, 4 hours. Only 1,100 square feet, still 3.5 to 4 hours. Crawl space, lots of defects, structural defects, electrical defects, things that I have to do a lot of work to denote location, defect, stuff that I still have to do back office to put the correct verbiage, examples of what needs to be corrected and how it needs to be corrected. And then I had a pre-drywall showed up, did what I could. The client and I had talked, and I said, "I'm not sure how much of this I'm going to be able to get because you said they weren't putting insulation until the end of the week. The house is insulated and sided. So,
Yeah.
I'm not looking at sill plate bolts. I'm not looking at quick ties. Can't look at roof to wall connections in certain areas. It's hard to see any type of truss work in certain areas. I can see nail guards. I can't make sure the outside's taped and stuff." So I had all three of the spectrums. But the big thing is seeing the difference from new construction to a 1950s home, the differences, the
Oh,
vast differences, and
tons.
the styles of building. In the 1950s home, I think a flipper bought it 6 years ago, sold it 3 years ago. I've got everything from aluminum branch wiring, braided aluminum, Romex. There is no service disconnect for the whole house.
Oh
Just
wow.
a it's just a panel, no service disconnect. So there's a defect.
And
Uh,
what, you can't even verify it because you're not going to throw. Is it in 6 hand movements? Can you shut it off? Which I think that's such a weird old standard. It's the old standard. If you didn't have a main disconnect, is you had how many throws of breakers to shut it off? What? It
yeah.
doesn't make
So
sense anymore.
there is no service disconnect in the house. There's no gooseneck it's an old style gooseneck and drip loop, and there's no gooseneck and drip loop. Um, the overhead service connector and the line go like this, and it's a square box that the wires go into, and it's asbestos, or not asbestos, but fabric wiring going down, no conduit,
Oh wow.
into a meter, into fabric line going into the house. So there's no amperage, it's the whole thing of like, you run into those homes and you're like, I showed up and I was like, wow, it's a brick 1950s home. Did a walk around, did my evaluation. I'm like, not one step crack. I poked my head into the crawl space before I went in. It was clean. It was well maintained. It's like, this is going to be a breeze.
No. Uh-uh. That
Lipstick on a
whenever
pig.
that thought runs through your head, it's gonna be a breeze. Add another hour. It's just
Yeah.
exactly what
I
happened.
went up into the attic and it's got that much insulation. But then I go, before that, I was at new construction and I was like, new construction, what am I going to find? And it's a builder that I actually say is one of the top 3 builders in the area for production homes.
Hmm.
And I went in, insulation's 19 inches deep in the attic. There are a couple defects here and there, like a handful, maybe 6 to 9, that need to be addressed. And I had my trainee with me today, and I was just like, this is what you typically find at new construction. Before we got there, and I left and I said, that's not typically how new construction goes. Typically, new construction, we are there for a bit longer. We tend to find a little bit more than what we did, but it's one of the better builders in the area. So we found a handful, 2 handfuls of items maybe. And I said, 1950s home, this could be good, this could be bad. It was definitely beautiful on the inside. I mean, lipstick on a pig. We talk about it all the time. House was flipped, let's say 5 years ago. HVAC is 14 years old. Water heater just got replaced this year. Roof is relatively new. Crawl space has been taken care of. Electric, completely outdated. If they pull that panel box, they're going to have to update the wiring to meet current code.
Right.
It's one of those things. And the person that's buying it is a realtor that I do a lot of business with. Her and her husband, she rolls her money into real estate that's the retirement plan, is eventually have enough rentals to
Yeah.
retire and just have mailbox money. And I get that.
Yeah. And the difference, those lipstick on the pigs and somebody that's lived in a home that's been cared for and maintained, but just his age, totally different. I mean, I would
Mm-hmm.
take today a home that has been lived in, used, worked on. There's been improvements, tons of improvements to the home. But the list of items that were on the maintenance list today and the repair list, they're not small, they're not irrelevant, but it's better than finding craziness in a flip of what has been done. The
Yep.
craziness in the flip can be like when they've come in and you've had the handyman who doesn't know all the code to wiring. Like if you're finding 6 to 9 things in the pre-drywall of new construction, they're all
Yep.
things that it's the attention to detail that you're giving to the builder to correct.
Yep.
They're not material defects. They're things that just need to be touched that were missed, and you're almost acting as construction management. The defects that you find sometimes in a flip are like monetary defects to the home that aren't correct, or they're a safety defect. And then in the older cared home, you're like, well, you're going to make the repair, do it right. Go to the electrician, go to the trades, and that'll help you out.
I am going to share one thing while we're here. And I'm just going to share this because I think it's kind of funny. So, as you can see here, these 2 pillars, they're completely off center. They're actually leaning this way and they're kicked out. Do you know how they fixed it?
How did they fix
There's there's hot glue on the bottom of both of those. Hot glue.
it?
I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
And that's a load bearing point of the carport.
I think the statement we use sometimes when we share photos is, "Hey, use what you have, not what's right." And that's what it seems like the person has done. They used what they have. They didn't use what was right.
It bothers me because I'll share this again. This is a different view. It bothers me because it's just Does that make it a little bit better for you to
Oh
see?
yeah, that definitely shows the difference there.
Okay. This is hot glued. There's hot glue on both sides of this.
Yeah.
So here's something I'm going to say, and this goes back to what we were talking about. This home was purchased by a Marine couple. Not now, previously. They had a home inspection done by another home inspection company 3 years ago. That home inspection company is still around. This was not called out in the inspection report. The service disconnect was not missing service disconnect was not called out in the inspection report. The lack of insulation was not called out in the inspection report. Every inspector is going to inspect different, and I'm not going to slight on anybody anyway. But speaking with them, I didn't talk to them about any of this. I said, so where are you guys moving to? It's nice
Yeah.
meeting you. Thanks for letting me inspect your home. All that. I see your spouse is in the service. Like, yeah, this is our first time. This was our first home we ever bought. And it breaks my heart because,
Yeah.
again, it goes back to interview your inspectors.
Yeah.
Um, Look at the quality of work they do. Look at their sample reports. Look at the detail. Ask around. Going with the cheapest person is not the best.
No.
And, they didn't share any of this information. I mean, I asked her, how it came about the inspection report is I asked her, I said, do you have another service panel in this house? And she's like, what do you mean? And I said, I'm trying to find another electrical panel with the service disconnect. And she was just like, where would it be? And I said, well, maybe in the little carport shed that's attached where the meter comes in the house or meter goes into that shed. And she's just like, and she had a large German Shepherd that's 13 years old. Her husband's deployed. I wasn't messing with the German Shepherd. She said, let me go check out back. And if it is, I'll let the dog in and you can go back out and look. And I said,
Yeah.
okay. She's like, there's not. And I was just like, well, when I get done with the interior, I'd like to go back out and look. And she's like, is that a problem? And I said, I can't really discuss that with you, but I do need to find the service disconnect. So she gets on her computer, very nice 27-year-old lady, and I've got my trainee with me. And he just kind of looks at me and I was like, we don't talk about this.
Uh-huh.
And she looks at me and she goes, oh, I've got the inspection report from when we bought the house. And I said, okay. And I was like, does it say the location of the service disconnect? She turns the computer around. It's Spectora software, and it just says service disconnect not found. Some people might not call it out. Myself, it's kind of imperative in my
Yeah.
book. And she said when they had the house inspected, there were very little defects found. It's only 3 years from the time of their last inspection.
So it's the same
Um,
conditions essentially.
Essentially, the detail, the quality of what you do as an inspector is important.
Yeah.
I can't emphasize that enough. Most people that are between the ages of 25 and 35, this is, it's their first home.
Yeah.
Uh, Having compassion, you know, I am not talking bad about other inspectors. I am saying that as a homeowner, the level of service that you would want for yourself needs to be evaluated and not evaluated on price. To each your own with provolone, all the little sayings, all that stuff that you might have.
Mm-hmm.
Realize that you have to go into this with eyes wide open.
Mm-hmm.
Your house is going to have defects. If you have a home inspection report and there are no defects on that inspection report, you need to be questioning how much the house was inspected.
Right.
Um, I had the woman that lived next door to this house I inspected today said, you guys have been here all day. I used to be a realtor up in Charleston. I was like, yeah. I was like, we've been here for 2.5 hours, going on 3. She was like, last person that was here for 45 minutes.
Yep. Ohio didn't have licensing for home inspectors to fairly recently, and there's a lot of inspector options in Ohio, and I think the guys are setting the bar a little bit higher now, which is great. There's a couple guys I know that take those SOPs very seriously for the product that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm actually excited to see how does that affect home quality 5 years from now? From what I'm seeing, will we see the 2019 2017 as people were grandfathered in of when the licensing came into effect? Will we start seeing transactionals get better once we see transactional inspections go up? We're starting to see in the numbers that there's more negotiation happening based on defects found in it. And a lot of times that's because people skip the inspection prior. So now you're finding material defects that the seller is going to be faced with either fixing or it's being done at the inspection, which I think hopefully it'll get better if guys, the companies that are doing a good job here locally, hopefully that will drive the quality of homes up. I mean, there'll still be the ugly ones out there, but it'll be. I'm hopeful. I'm going to be optimistic. So,
No, I mean, I can say that, for everybody watching this, value for dollars spent. Average home inspection, Brian and I were talking, this is between $500 or $600, if not a little bit more. Let's say between 550 and 700 for 2,500 square feet average home. Crawl space, things like that, ancillary service, all wrapped into that. Every year, you're going to see incremental price increases. Eventually, you're going to plateau, and then there'll be a little recession, as everything does, and it'll plateau up again, and it goes up, and it goes here, and then it drops down, then it goes up, and then it drops here, and eventually we end up at a point of leveling out. I tell people all the time, cheaper is not better, and the person that is not pricing themselves accordingly is not taking into account that gas costs more, tools cost more, uniforms cost more, training costs more, licensing costs more, houses cost more, insurance costs more. The only thing that's gone down recently is realtor fees are going down, but everything else that goes into a home inspection costs more. Materials when you need to get the house repaired. I personally rather have the house repaired now than 2 years from now. I personally rather negotiate that money now than later. I run into it consistently, and there's a handful of them that focus on, I'll have the report to you in 2 hours from the time and I've had this from the time the inspection starts, which in my personal opinion is impossible. You can have a good idea through a summary in about 3 hours, but you haven't gone through the report. Our reports are double audited, once by the inspector and then by myself. Verbiage is checked, locations checked, pictures are checked, quality of the report's checked, making sure everything is right location. Following through with the pricing, the quality. Ask the inspector how long he's going to be there. Ask the inspector what they're going to be looking at. Ask them how much detail they have. Those are the important things. I know you're just as detailed as I am, and you're just as OCD about it as I am.
yep. I give myself I I will miss appointments or block my schedule out based on looking at the side of the home to know that I have enough time to be there.
Yep.
And that's just the importance to me. And you know the and I have fun while I'm there. Like I tell people, I'm going to be having the best day of my life when I'm inspecting your new home because I'm enjoying it the whole
Mm-hmm.
time I'm there. And I want to be efficient and I want to be time. I don't want it to drag on. But in an older home, I just know it's going to take me time.
Yep.
And I enjoyed today knowing that with the inspection I was doing, I have the new sewer scope. I bought a crazy sewer scope that I wanted to have the better details. And I had my tablet set up with an 11-inch screen that everybody could see and watch while doing it. And I'm educating my buyer about what I'm actually looking at as we're retrieving in. I was like, I wanted them to see that process. I mean, looking down at a little screen that's like 5x7 that they're squatting down to see isn't making the experience better. But for
No.
me to be able to see the screen and do the job and them to be able to watch what the inspection is, that's just awesome because they now
Oh,
understand
100%.
what they're seeing in the pipe. Because, they're like, it's clay pipes. I'm like, well, what did you expect? It's 1941 it was built. I was like, what we're going to look at is the condition.
And how long did
But
that sewer scope take you, Brian?
This one we made it right to the curb. 82 feet was from the clean out to the sewer. Um, it took with showing them less than a half hour today, and that is
Let's say
insane.
20 minutes.
Yeah, 20 minutes.
20 minutes just for the sewer scope.
Yeah.
Did you inspect the house too?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So 45 minutes. Could you inspect that house in 25 minutes?
No, not at all. And I don't have the report done. And my saying is I'll have your report to you within 24 hours of the end of the inspection. Um,
That's exactly. I tell everybody 24 to 36 hours from the end of the inspection or the day of the inspection. So,
yeah.
and that's my rule of thumb. I tend to push literally myself. If I'm doing my reports are usually out within 12 to 24 hours. When I have to audit my other inspectors' reports, 24 to 36 hours.
Sometimes you got to step away from the report. That's why I give myself the 24. I shoot for
Yep.
12, but sometimes you just got to step away from it and then go back at it with a clear head, is my opinion of, I work better in the morning. So doing final reviews after the inspection, I'll make sure things are uploaded, organized, data storage, because we're essentially librarians with your information as we get home. You know, on average, I'm 60,000 photos a year, so knowing where everything is important. So
Mm-hmm.
once we streamline and download everything into the system, once I have that done, I can take and then read your report. 85% of it's completed in Spectora by the time I leave the property.
Yep.
And then I'm
Another
doing
benefit of Spectora.
another benefit of Spectora. And the next part of then is the review, and then taking that critical eye where you have a fresh set of eyes on it. Um, just like I tell the clients to go home, decompress after you read the report for a second, get dinner, enjoy your company if you're buying it with your wife or spouse or partner. Figure out how to prioritize the home. And yes, it's a 6-7 day window. That's what we see up here, 7 to 10 on inspections. But take that pause once you get the report, and you're only going to be more respectful of your decision to purchase the home and go forward.
Oh, 100%. Take that time, review the report, write down some questions, call the inspector,
Yeah.
ask the hard questions. Don't ask us if we'd buy the home.
No. Nope.
Don't ask me if I'd buy the home, because honestly, I probably would buy a lot of the homes, but I would probably spend a lot of money remodeling some of them
Yeah.
and renting them out or selling them. But I'm not a flipper. I'm a weirdo.
Yeah. It's you got to figure out what your needs are. I Ask me about Freon in a new system. Can you repair with R22? Can Ask me about things that you can do in the system, but don't ask me about if I buy the home. So
Yeah.
all
Well,
right, should we wrap it up here?
I'm going to wrap it up. I was going to say thanks everybody for tuning in. Sorry if we rambled a little bit this week. It was kind of a free form. Next week, I promise we'll be a lot better organized. But the big thing I can tell you guys is what's that?
I said that's no fun.
Remember, when booking a report, have the correct information, have the best information available to you. Depending on how you book the report online or with the person, that information is going to be critical. Always remember that when sharing, when if you're receiving a report from a seller's agent, that report means absolutely nothing to you. It means you do not own it. It means nothing to the actual purchase of the home. And, always be willing to ask questions of your home inspector. We're the trained professionals. We're the ones that are organizing this. The biggest pitfall for everybody is going into purchases like this blind. There's a reason why home inspectors are around. There's a reason why the industry is evolving. There's a reason why the software is evolving. Brian and I are here for you 100%. And, that's pretty much what we do on a daily basis.
Well said, sir.
All right, folks. Have a great evening. Talk to you guys next week, and have a great weekend.